My name is Emily, and I am 42 years old. What I'm about to tell you is the story of how the people who were supposed to love me most, the people I called family, systematically tore down my self-worth from the time I was a child, saw me only as a burden, a charity case they were stuck with, and how, decades later, I was able to use my success, earned through sheer grit and determination despite them, to make a statement they could never ignore. It's a story about betrayal, about the crushing weight of expectations you can never meet because the goalposts keep moving, and about finding your own strength when everyone around you tells you you're inherently weak and worthless. What happened next, after they discovered what I'd done, was even worse than the years of quiet cruelty, but I promise you, I will tell you the whole story, every painful detail. Before I dive in, tell me, where are you listening from today? Drop your location in the comments below. And if you've ever felt like an outsider in your own family, like you were never quite good enough no matter what you did, please hit that like button so I know I'm not alone. And if you want to hear more stories like this, raw and real, make sure you subscribe. Your support means the world as I share these difficult parts of my life. Growing up, our family wasn't poor, not by any stretch of the imagination. My father, Mr. David, was a respected doctor in our small, affluent town, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone and status was quietly but fiercely guarded. My mother, Mr. Richard's daughter from a prominent local manufacturing family, prided herself on appearances and maintaining the family's social standing. They had married relatively young, and their lives seemed, from the outside, picture perfect. I wasn't their biological child. I was adopted when I was just a baby. My birth parents were young, unmarried, and unable to care for me. My adoptive parents had struggled with infertility for years, and I was meant to be their longed-for child. And for a little while, I suppose I was. I have hazy, beautiful memories from when I was very small, maybe 3 or 4, of feeling loved and cherished. But as I got older, the cracks began to show. The first time I remember hearing anything remotely close to charity case wasn't those exact words, but the sentiment was unmistakable. I was about 7. We were at a family gathering, a big barbecue at my grandparents' sprawling estate on the edge of town. My mother's sister, my Aunt Carol, a woman whose smile never quite reached her eyes, was talking to my mother in hushed tones, but I was right there, playing near them. Aunt Carol sighed dramatically and said, "It's just so generous of you, Elizabeth, taking her in like that. A real act of Christian kindness." My mother just smiled thinly, a tight, brittle smile that didn't involve her eyes either. "We wanted a child, Carol." "Of course, dear. But you could have waited, gone through the proper channels, gotten a healthy baby. From a good background. This way. Well, you never know what you're getting, do you? It's like taking in a stray." Bless your heart for trying. I didn't fully understand the words stray or background then, but I understood the tone. It was pity mixed with something cold and judgmental. It was the first seed planted, the idea that I was fundamentally other, that I was a burden they had chosen to take on out of some sense of duty or piety, not because they simply wanted me. This wasn't an isolated incident. As I grew, the subtle remarks piled up. My cousins, particularly Aunt Carol's daughters, Sarah and Jessica, who were just a few years older than me, would sometimes make snide comments. If I got a new dress, Sarah might say, "Oh, is that from the donation bin again, Emily?" If I struggled with a school subject, Jessica would whisper loud enough for me to hear, "Well, what do you expect? She doesn't have the same advantages." The advantages they were referring to, I came to understand, were not about wealth or education, we all had plenty of that, but about bloodline. They were constantly reminded of their lineage, the long line of doctors, lawyers, successful businessmen, and women in our family tree. My family tree, they seemed to imply, was blank or worse, filled with unknown, undesirable elements. My parents, especially my mother, rarely defended me directly against these jibes. Instead, they would offer weary sighs or tell me not to be so sensitive. "They don't mean anything by it, Emily," my mother would say. But their eyes, those cold, distant eyes, told a different story. They seemed to agree, on some level, that I was different, and that difference was a disadvantage. The term charity case wasn't used openly in our immediate household, but it was woven into the fabric of how I was treated. My father was often absent, engrossed in his work, but when he was home, he was stern and critical. My mother managed the household and social calendar with military precision, and I felt like a project she had taken on, one that wasn't quite meeting expectations. She would constantly compare me to my cousins, praising their achievements while dissecting my flaws. "Why can't you be more like Sarah?" she'd ask after school play, where I had a small part while Sarah was the lead. "She's so poised, so naturally talented. You always seem rough around the edges." "Jessica got a scholarship to the state university, Emily. You need to focus more on your studies if you ever hope to get anywhere. You don't have the same safety net." The safety net was the family's wealth and connections, which they seemed to imply were less available to me than to their biological relatives. Money was never an issue for the family in general, but when it came to me, there was a subtle, almost imperceptible tight-fistedness. My clothes were often hand-me-downs from my cousins, who were admittedly taller and wore different styles. My allowance was smaller than my friends', and any request for something extra, like a new book or a school trip, was met with lengthy lectures about the value of money and how some people have to work hard for everything they get. It was a constant, low-grade reminder that I was dependent, and that dependency was a burden. They provided for me, yes, but it felt less like loving provision and more like begrudging obligation. It felt like charity. By the time I was a teenager, I had internalized their view of me. I was quiet, insecure, and deeply anxious about failing. I believed I was less capable, less intelligent, less worthy of love and success than my cousins, than anyone with a clear lineage. I worked hard in school, driven by a desperate need to prove them wrong, but also paralyzed by the fear that they were right. My escape was art. I loved to draw and paint. It was the only place where I felt truly free, where I could create something entirely my own without judgment. My parents, however, saw it as a frivolous hobby. "Art won't pay the bills, Emily," my father would say, shaking his head. "You need a practical profession. Something stable. Doctor, lawyer. Something respectable," my mother agreed, pushing me towards subjects like math and science, where I struggled, rather than encouraging my natural talent. When it came time for college, I wanted to go to a state university known for its excellent art program. My parents scoffed. "An art degree? What on earth would you do with that?" my mother exclaimed. "That's not a real career, Emily. We can't finance something so precarious. You need to think realistically. You don't have a family fortune to fall back on, remember? You need to be able to support yourself." They insisted I apply to the local university, the same one my cousins attended, and pursue a business degree. It was practical, respectable, and kept me close to home, where they could presumably keep an eye on their investment. I felt trapped. I applied, got accepted, and enrolled in business courses, my heart heavy with disappointment. University was tough. I felt out of place among the confident, privileged students who seemed to glide through their classes, secure in their family connections and financial futures. I studied hard, but my heart wasn't in it. I still secretly took drawing classes in the evenings, finding solace in the studio. During my second year, I discovered graphic design. It was a revelation, a way to combine my artistic skills with practical application. It felt like a compromise I could live with. I started taking design courses, excelling in them in a way I never had with my business classes. My parents were skeptical, but somewhat mollified when I explained it was a marketable skill for the digital age. "As long as you can get a real job," my father cautioned. It was in a graphic design class that I met Professor Miller, a kind, eccentric woman who saw my potential. She noticed my quiet dedication, my unique perspective, and the depth of emotion in my work. She encouraged me to pursue freelance design work while still in school, helping me land a few small local projects. These projects paid barely anything, but they gave me confidence and a sense of purpose I hadn't felt before. After graduation, I moved to a city several hours away. It was a terrifying step, leaving the only home I'd ever known, but I desperately needed to escape the suffocating atmosphere of my family's expectations and judgments. They didn't approve, of course. Why move so far? My mother fussed. There are plenty of jobs here. It's irresponsible to go off on your own like that. What if something happens? It's not like you have family out there to rely on, my father added, another not-so-subtle reminder of my solitary status in their world. But I went anyway. I rented a tiny, rundown apartment in a less-than-desirable neighborhood and started applying for design jobs. The job market was tough, and I faced rejection after rejection. I worked minimum wage jobs to pay the rent, drawing in my spare time, building a portfolio. There were days I felt utterly defeated, days I wondered if my parents and their family were right, if I was destined to struggle, to be a failure, a perpetual charity case just barely scraping by. I remember one particularly low point. It was winter, my apartment was freezing, and I was living on instant noodles. I called home, hoping for a word of encouragement, some comfort. My mother answered, and I hesitantly told her about my struggles, about how hard it was finding a design job. There was a long pause. Then she sighed, a sound I knew all too well. "Well, Emily," she said, her voice dripping with "I told you so. Maybe you should have listened to us. Maybe you should have gotten a proper business degree and stayed here. It's much harder out there when you don't have connections. You have to be realistic about your limitations. Not everyone is cut out for success on their own." That call was a turning point. It was the moment I realized they weren't going to save me, weren't going to offer comfort or belief. Their role was to remind me of my perceived inadequacies. Hanging up the phone, I cried for hours, but after the tears stopped, a cold, hard resolve settled in. I would not be a charity case. I would not fail. I would prove them wrong. Not for them, but for myself. I threw myself into my freelance work, taking any small graphic design gig I could find, designing logos for local businesses, flyers for events, websites for startups. I taught myself new software, stayed up late honing my skills. I was cheap and reliable, and slowly my reputation grew. One small project led to another, and then a bigger one. I designed a website for a tech startup that ended up getting a lot of attention. This led to more inquiries, larger clients, and soon I was making enough money to quit my minimum wage job. I specialized in branding and user experience design for tech companies. It was a niche that was exploding, and my ability to blend aesthetic design with intuitive functionality was in high demand. I worked tirelessly, sometimes 18 hours a day. I saved every penny I could, reinvesting in my business, hiring a small team. Within a few years, my little freelance operation had grown into a respected design agency. We had clients all over the country, major names in the tech world. I was finally financially secure, more than secure, in fact. I bought a small, comfortable apartment, then a house. I could afford nice things, travel, help friends who were struggling. It was surreal. The girl who was told she had no safety net, no connections, was building a successful enterprise from scratch. My family's reaction to my success was muted at first. When I first told them I was making a good living as a graphic designer, they seemed unimpressed. "Oh, that's nice, dear," my mother said vaguely. "But is it stable?" My father asked if I had a retirement plan. They couldn't seem to grasp that freelance design could be more lucrative than many traditional professions. As my agency grew, and I started getting mentions in business publications, their attitude shifted. It wasn't pride, not really. It was more like suspicious curiosity. They started asking about my income, about my clients. My cousins Sarah and Jessica, who were in stable but less high-paying careers, suddenly wanted to network with me. Aunt Carol started introducing me at family gatherings as my niece, the successful designer. But there was an undercurrent of envy in her tone. They still couldn't quite shake their ingrained perception of me. During one visit home for a holiday dinner, my father was talking about his latest investment in the stock market. My mother mentioned something about needing a new car. And then, my Uncle Robert, Aunt Carol's husband, a man who had always treated me like a quiet background fixture, piped up, "Emily, you're doing well now, right? Good for you. Must be nice to finally stand on your own 2 feet. You know, for a while there, we were all a bit worried about how Elizabeth and David would manage you being, well, you know, a bit of a burden." There it was. Not charity case exactly, but burden, the same sentiment. dressed up slightly differently. My success hadn't erased their original view of me. It had just made them acknowledge it begrudgingly, while still hinting at the past cost I represented. I felt a hot wave of anger wash over me, but years of suppression kept me silent. I just forced a smile and changed the subject. That comment stung deeply. It reinforced the idea that my worth was constantly being measured against some invisible ledger of costs and benefits. Even successful, I was still, in their minds, the adopted child who had required effort and expense, a weight on their shoulders. It was around this time that I started thinking more about my hometown. Despite the painful memories associated with my family there, it was still the place where I grew up. I remember the public library where I spent hours drawing, the old community center where I took my first art class offered through a low-cost after-school program, the park where I found moments of peace. These places, often underfunded and overlooked by the town's wealthier residents, like my family, had offered me refuge and inspiration when my home life felt stifling. I also knew the town was struggling. Like many small towns, it had lost some of its industry over the years. The downtown area was looking tired, community programs were being cut, and opportunities for young people, especially those from less privileged backgrounds, were limited. It bothered me. I had the means now, the financial ability to make a real difference. The idea began to form slowly, then gained momentum. What if I used my success, the very thing my family had doubted I could achieve, to give back to the community that had, in its own quiet way, supported me? And what if, in doing so, I also made a statement about my own journey, a statement that would resonate in the very place where I had been made to feel small and insignificant? I decided to make a significant donation to the town. Not just a small contribution, but a large, impactful sum. I wanted it to fund programs for young people, renovate the community center, support the library, maybe even establish a scholarship for students pursuing creative fields, the kinds of opportunities one wished I'd had more of, the kinds of things my family had dismissed as impractical. I worked with my financial advisor and a lawyer to set up a foundation. I wanted the donation to be made public, announced to the town. This wasn't about seeking glory, though I knew some would see it that way. It was about reclaiming my narrative in the place where it had been twisted and diminished for so long. It was about showing everyone, including my family, that the charity case had not only succeeded but was now capable of being a major benefactor. The process took several months. I kept it quiet, only involving my closest advisors. I knew if my family found out beforehand, they would either try to stop me, demand the money for themselves, or try to control how it was used. I wanted this to be my act, pure and simple. When everything was ready, the foundation made the announcement. It was big news in a small town. The local newspaper ran a front-page story. Local resident donates millions for community revitalization and youth programs. My name, Emily Carter, was featured prominently as the benefactor. I wasn't living in my hometown anymore, but I still had friends there who kept me updated. The news spread like wildfire. There was shock, excitement, gratitude from many in the town. And then there was the reaction from my family. I got a call from my mother first. Her voice was strained, a mixture of disbelief and barely contained fury. Emily, what is this I'm hearing?
Millions?
You donated millions to the town? Why didn't you tell us? It was a personal decision, Mother, I said calmly. My heart was pounding, but I felt a strange sense of peace. I was finally standing up for myself, not with anger, but with action. A personal decision? She practically shrieked.
Millions.
You have millions and you give it away to the town? We're your family, Emily. Don't you think we could have used some of that money? Your father is thinking about retirement. The house needs work. Carol's daughters need help with down payments. There it was. Not congratulations, not even curiosity about why I did it, but immediate entitlement. They saw my success not as a testament to my hard work, but as a resource they were owed. I worked hard for that money, I said, my voice steady. Every single dollar. And I chose to give it to the community that gave me a start, the places that felt like home when my own home didn't. What is that supposed to mean? Her voice was icy. It means, I said, taking a deep breath, that I remember everything. I remember being told I was a burden, that I wouldn't amount to anything, that I didn't have the same advantages. I remember being treated like a charity case you were obligated to take in. This donation is my way of saying that the charity case not only survived but thrived, and is now giving back in a way you never expected. Silence hung heavy on the line. Then, she spoke, her voice dangerously low. You are being cruel, Emily. After everything we did for you, we gave you a home, a good education, opportunities. You gave me a roof over my head and the bare minimum expected of parents. I countered, the words pouring out now, years of suppressed pain fueling them. But you never gave me acceptance. You never gave me belief. You always made me feel like I was less than a project, a burden. And Uncle Robert just last year, confirming that he still saw me as a burden. Did you think I didn't hear? Did you think I didn't feel it every single day? That's a ridiculous exaggeration, she snapped. Nobody called you a charity case. Not in those exact words, perhaps, I said. But that's how you made me feel. That's how your family treated me. And you stood by and let it happen. The conversation devolved quickly after that. She accused me of being ungrateful, of trying to embarrass them, of throwing money away. She brought up every perceived slight, every time I hadn't met their expectations. It was a torrent of recrimination and manipulation, trying to make me feel guilty, to diminish my achievement and my reasons for it. I didn't back down. I calmly but firmly reiterated that the money was mine, earned by me, and I had the right to use it as I saw fit. I reminded her of specific instances of their condescension and the impact it had on me. Finally, I said, I did this for the town, Mother. And yes, I did it for myself too. To prove that I am not and never was a charity case. I hope the money does a lot of good.
Goodbye.
I hung up before she could respond. My hand was shaking, but my mind felt clear. I had finally said my piece. The fallout was intense. My mother called back multiple times, leaving angry voicemails. My father sent a stern email about family duty and responsibility. Aunt Carol called, not to congratulate me, but to lecture me on fiscal responsibility and how family should come first. My cousins Sarah and Jessica messaged me, a mix of fake congratulations and thinly veiled resentment, hinting that they were surprised someone like me had managed this. The worst came a few weeks later. There was a town event celebrating the donation, a small ceremony at the renovated community center. I was invited, of course, as the benefactor. I decided to go. It felt important to be there, to see the impact of my donation firsthand, and to face my family, who I knew would likely attend out of a sense of obligation or curiosity. When I arrived, there was a buzz in the air. People I hadn't seen in years, teachers, old neighbors, friends from school, came up to thank me, their faces full of genuine gratitude. It was overwhelming in the best way. Then I saw my family, my parents, Aunt Carol and Uncle Robert, Sarah and Jessica, standing together near the back, looking stiff and uncomfortable. Their smiles were plastered on, clearly for show. As I made my way through the crowd, accepting congratulations, I eventually reached them. Emily, my mother said, her voice falsely sweet. You came. We weren't sure you would show your face after. Well, after the fuss. Why wouldn't I? I asked, meeting her gaze directly. This is a wonderful event for the town. Yes, well, my father interjected, stepping forward. It's certainly generous, though perhaps a bit extravagant. There are certainly more pressing matters family could attend to, like helping your nieces with down payments? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Sarah and Jessica flushed beside him. That's not the point, Emily, Aunt Carol snapped, losing her veneer of politeness. The point is, family takes care of family. You have this sudden fortune, and you're giving it away to strangers, while your own blood struggles. Strangers? I repeated, gesturing around the room at the townspeople. These are the people I grew up with. They run the businesses I went to, taught me in school, lived next door. They're not strangers. As for blood, it seems the only time my blood family is interested in me is when they think they can benefit financially. My mother gasped dramatically.
How dare you?
After everything. Yes, after everything, I said, my voice clear and steady. After years of making me feel unwelcome, of reminding me I was different, of calling me a burden, a charity case. Do you really think I owe you anything more than I already have? We never called you that, my father said, his face reddening. Uncle Robert called me a burden just last year, implying you worried about supporting me. I countered, looking him directly in the eye. He shifted uncomfortably. Aunt Carol implied I was a stray when I was 7. You, Mother, constantly reminded me I had no safety net. What do you think that translates to, decade after decade? It translates to charity case. That's a nasty interpretation, Sarah muttered under her breath. Is it? I challenged her. Or is it the truth you've all refused to acknowledge? The air was thick with tension. Other people nearby had gone quiet, sensing the family drama unfolding. My mother tried a different tactic. Emily, we can discuss this later. This isn't the place. Why not? I asked, looking out at the crowd again. These people are benefiting from the very thing you dismissed and devalued me. My ability to succeed, my choice to give back. You wanted a respectable child, a doctor or a lawyer. You got a designer who built a successful business and donated millions to the town. Maybe my path wasn't the one you envisioned, but it turns out it was pretty damn respectable after all. I looked at each of them in turn. I spent my entire life trying to earn your approval, trying to be the person you wanted me to be. And you know what? It was exhausting, and it was impossible. Because your opinion of me was fixed long ago. It wasn't about who I was, it was about where I came from, or where I didn't come from. Well, I'm done trying. This donation is the best thing I could do, for this town and for myself. It's proof that I am capable, that I am valuable, and that I will not be defined by your limited vision of me. With that, I turned away from them. I spent the rest of the event talking to the townspeople, feeling a profound sense of liberation. I had said what needed to be said, not just to them, but to myself. I had stood in my truth, even though it was painful. The aftermath with my family was predictable. They were furious, feeling publicly shamed by my words and actions. For a while, they didn't speak to me at all. Then came the attempts at damage control, the gaslighting. Calls trying to rewrite history, claiming they had always been supportive, that I was misremembering things, that I was clearly unbalanced to give away so much money and then attack them publicly. I didn't engage. I had set my boundaries, sharp and clear, during that confrontation. I responded to their calls and messages with brief, polite, and firm reminders of my position. I am not discussing this further. My decision was made. I wish you well. If they persisted, I would end the conversation or not respond to the message. It was difficult. There were moments of doubt, moments when the years of ingrained insecurity would creep back in. Had I been too harsh? Was I really ungrateful? But then I would remember the feeling of being called a burden, the cold looks, the constant comparisons, the lack of belief. I would look at the photos from the town event, seeing the smiling faces of people whose lives would be touched by my donation, and I knew I had done the right thing. The relationship with my family is irrevocably changed. We have very little contact now. Occasional brief, stilted phone calls or holiday cards. The warmth that was never really there is completely gone, replaced by a polite distance. It's sad in a way, mourning the family I wished I had, but it's also freeing. I am no longer tied to their approval or their narrative of who I am. The donation has made a real difference in my hometown. The community center was fully renovated and is now a vibrant hub for activities. The library has expanded its resources and programs. The scholarship fund has helped several young people pursue their dreams, including some in the arts. Seeing the tangible positive impact has been incredibly fulfilling. My personal journey has been a long one, from a child internalizing the label of charity case to an adult who could give millions back to the community that raised her. It taught me that your worth is not determined by your family's opinion, or your background, or your bank account, but by your integrity, your resilience, and your capacity to create and contribute. It taught me the power of speaking your truth, even when it's difficult and causes conflict. Setting boundaries, even with family, is not an act of cruelty, but an act of self-preservation and self-respect. It took me a long time to realize that the way my family treated me wasn't a reflection of my value, but a reflection of their own limitations, their own insecurities, perhaps even their own discomfort with my origins or their choice to adopt. They projected their issues onto me, and I carried that weight for years. But I don't carry it anymore. I built my own success on my own terms, using the very skills they dismissed. I chose to use that success to empower others and to make a statement about who I am, loud and clear, in the place where my voice was often silenced. It wasn't revenge, not in the traditional sense. It was vindication. It was reclaiming my story. Thank you for listening to my story. It's been a difficult journey, but sharing it helps. If anything in my story resonated with you, especially the feeling of being misunderstood or undervalued by family, please share your experience in the comments below. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who tried to put you in a box? If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. It lets me know these stories are connecting with people. And if you want to hear more stories about overcoming adversity, setting boundaries, and finding your own path, don't forget to subscribe. Your support makes it possible for me to share these personal journeys. Remember, your past doesn't define your future. You have the strength to overcome difficult beginnings and rewrite your own story. Speak your truth, stand in your worth, and build the life you deserve.